on to the next panel, and I will invite Marjolaine Doblado to come here and to make her presentation about the audit market.
I will wait a few minutes, or seconds, until my presentation is on. You will see a lot of figures, so if you are allergic to figures and to graphs, it's your moment to turn to your emails. But now... Okay, so this session we'll deal with a certain number of information that are coming from the last market monitoring report of the H3C. As you know, every 3 years we do a deep dive into the market, and the figures that we will present today are coming from those figures from market monitoring. So, by allowing a distribution of the audit work between 2 or more audit firms that do not belong to the same network, joint audit can impact the structure of the market. So the presentation will start now with the overview of the general market in France. So by setting the scene, I would like, just as a reference point, to let you know that in France there are 271,024 engagements, which are here in the total market of the entities which are subject to audit requirement. And with regard to that, we have 4,000 active audit firms in the full market, and also more than 5,000 individuals appointed as auditor for specific entities. If we compare the market shares in 2 buckets, we have the first bucket with the 5 biggest network. As was mentioned this morning, we treat 5 networks in the same bucket because they have quite the similar size on the market. So those account for 27% of the engagement, and so the other firms have 73% of the remaining market. So you have a graph indicating this percentage. If we look at the perspective of the fees, you see on this graph here that the 5 biggest networks have quite a similar size of the market in terms of fees, and that half of the market is divided between the remaining other firms. That's just for the general market. Moving here to the pie market in particular, so that's the market in which we have the most joint audit. As indicated previously, the requirement for joint audit is for the entities which establish consolidated financial statements and publish them. So in this pie audit market, we have, I think, approximately 60% of the engagement which are performed jointly. And so in this market, what's interesting to note is that we have 250 audit firms, a bit more than this figure, that are working on that market. So here in this table, you have the figures, meaning that for listed companies, there are 2,005 active audit firms to audit the listed entities. For the listed banks, we have 16 firms engaged in this market. And we have also for insurance more than 100 actors that play a role on this specific market. So a lot of actors can be involved in the market, and we believe this is partly due to the fact that there are some joint audit engagement in this market in particular. If we turn now to the pie engagement by network, you have here a chart indicating what is the respective size of the network. So you will see that there is quite a balance between the various networks in this number of pie engagement. So You have here 5 networks and the 250 other firms that are in one graph. Okay, if we have now a comparison in terms of audit fees and the revenues that the audit firms have from their engagement, you will see that the predominance of the 5 biggest is higher. We have here the representation of the proportion of each of the 5 biggest network for France, and we see that they have a respective higher size than the smaller firms, the 250 others, which have a limited part of this market in terms of fees. So meaning that the fees are most driven by the big 5 for the French conception. Okay, if we go now to a comparison of those figures with the ones that are available on the EU market, the reference point that we took was the report that is prepared by the European Commission every 3 years, and that is based on the figures that are compilated from and collected by the members of the CIOB and counterparts, audit regulators in Europe. So I will turn to the next slide, so please don't be afraid, because even if the screen is big, you may get some difficulties to read this graph. If I give you some explanation, you have here the respective size on the market of, in the first line, you have the big 4 market share in percentage from the engagement. The second bar is the 4 biggest player in each of the countries, and the last bar is the 10 most important players in each European countries. So of course it's a bit difficult to read, so we have extracted some data so that it's a bit easier to read. Here you can see just the figure of the market share from the big 4 on the PAI statutory audit market. So the first line is for Luxembourg. In Luxembourg, you see that you have 90% of the engagement which are audited by the big 4. Then you have Netherlands, Ireland, and the UK, where the market share is more than 80%. Then you have Spain, Italy, Germany. We just selected the biggest economies from the previous table. So those 2 countries see that there are more than 70% of the engagement of the PAIs that are held also by Big 4. And the number for France is around 52% here. So you can see that the difference is quite important between the other economies and France. And then you have 2 other bars. So the situation is even less concentrated in Portugal and in Bulgaria. So the colleagues from Bulgaria have the best the best deconcentrated market, where we have only 12% in the hand of the same 4 bigs. Okay, let's move now. So that was for the comparison between the French market and the EU economies. And we just wanted to finish this presentation by a few takeaways from this market data. First of all, to remind that we have 250 audit firms that are active on the PAI audit market in France. 5 main networks, and you saw the figures and how the distribution was done between those 5 main networks in France. The market is certainly less concentrated in France than in most EU countries. And we believe that the access of the PAI audit market is really facilitated by joint audit. Now, is this situation fully satisfactory? The H3C, when preparing and issuing its report in 2019, wanted to highlight that there are still some difficulties for the upper level of the market, meaning the very big international groups of entities, which sometimes have the tendency to choose for instance, 2 big 4 firms. And of course, this has no deconcentration effect on the market. And some of the questions that the H3C raised at that time were to think about any mechanism so that the College of Auditors would comprise a bigger player, but also a challenger firm, which would have a more deconcentrating effect, more deconcentrating effect on the market. The other question that was raised by some constituents were to say, should joint auditor be only for 2 auditors, or should it be for 3 auditors? Would that have some better impact on the concentration? And the other and the last question that I offer to your thoughts is whether audit committees could be incentivized further to recommend not only one of the biggers for appointment to become the auditor of one company in particular. So with that, I think I've covered in, I hope, less than 10 minutes the topic, but happy to hand over to you again, Patrick.
Thank you, Marjolaine. Are there questions to Marjolaine?
Yes, maybe one. Oliver Marnet.
Wait, we have a microphone for you.
Thank you. Oliver Marnet, Southampton Business School. Figures and numbers are lovely.
You can put down your mask. It would be better.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll try again. 2 questions on more numbers and figures, if you have that. Is the market concentration in France increasing, decreasing, or stable over time? And secondly, in reviews of audits performed by regulators, what roughly is the percentage of audits that were deemed inadequate in terms of quality?
Okay, so for the first question, thank you for the questions. For the first question, I would better respond to your question in a few months. We are doing the exercise, and we will have some figures for the comparison. I would say in about 6 months, 7 months from here. So I cannot exactly give you the figures for the tendency of the market in the long term. We will need to see. And your second question was about the rate of findings, or sorry?
Of audits that were reviewed by a regulator or a regulatory authority were deemed to be inadequate in terms of quality.
Yeah, for that you have to refer back to the H3C report. You have a certain number of figures in this regard with regard to the rates of it's not inadequate, but the rate of engagement where some findings were identified by the regulator. And I must say I do not have all those figures at hand, but happy to share with you the report, and it's also available online on the website of the H3C.
Professor Sharp.
Thank you. Slide number 9 is very interesting because you have a country between Bulgaria and France, which is Portugal, right?
Yes.
So Portugal, you don't have joint audit there. How do you explain that?
I'm sorry that I cannot answer to this question. I did not look at exactly what the situation in Portugal was. But certainly they do not have a joint audit, so maybe there are some other very good bullets to deconcentrate the market.
Thank you, Marjolaine. Oh, sorry, there's another question over there.
Yeah, maybe an insight on Portugal. There is a large number of PIEs that are specific to the countries. So and small in size, but specific to the country. So maybe an explanation why there is this level of deconcentration.
Thank you. We'll have to dig further and understand better the situation over there. Thank you, Marjolaine.